It's fascinating to consider that the God of all creation, who made and sustains all things, who causes the sun to shine and earth to spin, the God who is all-knowing and all-powerful, perfect in wisdom and justice, has chosen to work with imperfect, messy humans. Our Bible tells us story after story of how this is true. God partnering with the most unlikely people to bring about his glorious purposes. In fact, God wants to partner with you, allowing you to be a part of the loving work of building God's kingdom and pointing people to Jesus. Join us over the summer as we take a look at a variety of people who God calls, what part they played in God's saving work, and how God is inviting us to be a part of it today.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Well, today we're going to spend some time on one of the longest, most detailed stories in the Old Testament, the story of Joseph. It spans over 20 years, 13 chapters, and it's easy to read like a highlight reel. Dreams, betrayal, slavery, prison, and a palace. But if you slow down and actually sit in the years of Joseph, this isn't a highlight reel. This is a story of what it looks like to keep showing up faithfully when it doesn't look like anything is happening around you. Back in the 1920s and 30s, researchers ran a series of studies at the Hawthorne Works, a factory just outside of Chicago. They wanted to know what makes workers more productive. They wanted to see if making the lights brighter or dimmer, if having longer breaks made a difference, if the pay structure made a difference. They tried all kinds of changes. And here's the strange part. Almost every change caused productivity to go up. Didn't matter if they made the lights brighter or dimmer, didn't matter if they had longer breaks, didn't matter if they got paid more, the output kept going up. Eventually, researchers realized the changes themselves were not the reason. The workers were more productive because someone was watching them. Someone with a clipboard was standing next to them writing notes. See, that's it. That's the whole variable of this. People perform differently when they know someone is watching them. They call it now the Hawthorne effect, and it's been observed again and again since. To put someone under observation, they will become more productivity. Often realizing it, not often without even realizing it. So here's the honest question underneath it all. Who are you when nobody is watching or tracking your effort? That question sits at the center of Joseph's whole life. Because from the pit to the house to the prison to the palace, Joseph is the same man. He has the same posture, the same integrity. See, it's wildly different circumstances, but there's almost no difference to how he shows up within those circumstances. So the question is why? Why does a man who's been betrayed, been enslaved, and forgotten show up faithfully? The answer goes back further than just Joseph's dreams. It goes back to Abraham. There's a promise that God makes to Abraham that he would make him a great nation, that his descendants would be blessed, that the whole world would be blessed through his descendants. And this is passed on to Isaac. This is passed on to Jacob, Joseph's own father. So Joseph grew up in a family that this promise was overarching theme within their family. It was bigger than themselves. A promise from God that hadn't yet been fulfilled, but also hadn't failed yet. His own dreams and even his own suffering sit inside this larger story of God's story. See, his faithfulness isn't blind stubbornness. It's a response to the promise that God has made to his people. That even when the circumstances aren't looking good, you can still believe in the promise. And here's the good news for us this morning. We have that same promise. We have that same promise that has been made to us. We're not just told to be faithful and figure it out the why. The promise to Abraham has found its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. God is working. God is with us. God has made a promise to his people. Joseph, generations of promise he had to hold on to, and we also have those promises to hold on to. So today isn't a story about Joseph. It's an invitation to that same kind of faithfulness. Not because we're stronger than our circumstances, but we have a God that's made a promise to us that we can stay faithful to. I'd love for you to turn to Genesis 50, verse 20. This is Joseph decades later speaking to the very brothers who sold him into slavery as a teenager. And here's what he says to them. You intended to do harm to me, but God intended it for good, to preserve the lives of many people, as is happening now. Hold on to that verse. Don't do anything with it. Put it in your back pocket, because we're about to spend the next 20 minutes looking at the story of Joseph before he ever got to say that sentence to his brothers. We got the house, we got the prison, we got the palace, and I want you to watch for something. At no point in this story does Joseph get to see where it's all headed. He's just making one faithful decision after another, day after day after day, with no clarity of where this is going to be leading. So let's walk through these 3 rooms Joseph lived in, and let's see what faithfulness looks like in those rooms, long before he ever had his Genesis 50 to explain it. Let's start where Joseph starts. Not in a palace, but in a house he was dragged in. Joseph is faithful in the house long before he is faithful anywhere else. Joseph's own brothers hated him. Their father gave him an elaborate coat as favoritism. And Joseph had 2 dreams suggesting that his whole entire family would bow down before him. That resentment boils over, and they grab him. They throw him in a pit, and then they sit down and eat lunch as he screams below them. See, in Genesis 42:21 tells us decades later, they still remembered it. We saw his anguish when he pleaded for his life, and we would not listen. See, then they sell him, a 17-year-old, to a caravan of traders for 20 pieces of silver. And he ends up a slave in Egypt, in the house of a man named Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. See, faithfulness doesn't wait for fair conditions. Think about that for a second. This isn't a man who chose a hard season. This is a teenager who had his entire life taken from him from the people that should have loved him the most. No warning, no saying it. One day he's his father's favorite. The next he's thrown into a pit and he's a slave. And here's what Genesis 39 tells us. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. Not because his circumstances got better. His circumstances were still slavery. But Potiphar noticed something different about the way Joseph worked and put him in charge of his entire household, everyone within his kingdom. He prospered because of how he showed up inside of a life that he never chose. Then the test escalates. Potiphar's wife starts pursuing Joseph, not once, but day after day, according to the text. And think about the privacy of this moment. Nobody's watching. There's no cameras. There's no accountability. No chance of getting caught in any way that would matter to them. This is the exact kind of moment some say wouldn't count because nobody will ever see. And Joseph says this, how could I do this and sin against God? How could I do this and sin against God? Notice who he's talking to. He's not worried about Potiphar finding out. He's not calculating the odds of exposure. His faithfulness answers to God, not whether anyone is watching him. And here's the part we don't like to talk about. Doing the right thing doesn't protect him. See, Potiphar's wife lies, produces his cloak as a false evidence, and Joseph is falsely accused and thrown into prison. punished for the very integrity that should have been rewarded. Faithfulness in this story doesn't pay off, it costs him. So what can we learn about the experience Joseph lives in the house? We need to be faithful with what's in front of us, not with what we wish was in front of us. Joseph never once says, this doesn't count because I didn't choose it. He never says, I'll be faithful once my circumstances are fair. Some of you are faithful in a life that you didn't pick, a diagnosis, a family that's harder than you expected, a job that's not your dream job anymore. Joseph doesn't get to rewrite his circumstances. He just decides who he's going to be inside of them. And here's the deeper question this room asks. What does it actually look like when your faith is being tested? Because temptation rarely looks dramatic. It looks like a private moment where nobody would ever know. It looks like an easy lie that solves an immediate problem. It looks like a shortcut that would cost you nothing in the moment. Potiphar's wife wasn't a one-time event for Joseph. Again, in the text it says day after day after day. That's what temptation looks like. Not a single moment of weakness, but a repeated invitation to give in. Worn down a little more each time. So ask yourselves honestly this morning, where is your faith being tested right now? Where does temptation keep showing up within your story? Because Joseph's story doesn't promise that resisting will make things easier. It just asks you to be faithful in the moment. So it appears that faithfulness costs Joseph. It doesn't lead him to freedom. It actually leads him somewhere darker. If Joseph was faithful in the house, he's about to be tested whether he's going to be faithful in the forgotten room. Joseph lands in a prison. If you're tracking his story, this is rock bottom. Falsely accused, forgotten by his family, now locked away. And there's no indication that this is ever going to change. To Joseph, this could have been his lifetime. It says this in Psalm 105:18, reflecting back on this exact season that Joseph's in prison. It says this, they bruised his feet with shackles. His neck was put in iron. And what does he do? Genesis 39:21 says this, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Same line as before, just a different building. The warden puts him in charge of everything to do with the prison. And then two of Pharaoh's officials land in the same cell, a cupbearer and a baker. They're troubled by a dream. Joseph doesn't have to help them. Nobody would have said anything different about Joseph if he would have just sat there. But he asks, what is troubling you? And he interprets the dreams accurately. To the cupbearer he says, you'll be restored in 3 days. And all he asked in return was this, remember me and show me kindness. That's all that Joseph asked for. Remember me and show me kindness. And then, nothing. Genesis 40:23 ends with one of the most quietly devastating lines. It says, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. For 2 years. Sit in that for a second. Joseph does the right thing, does it well, asks for nothing but to be remembered, and gets forgotten anyway. This is probably the least significant feeling stretch of the entire story for Joseph. No dreams here, no angels, no promises being fulfilled, just a man doing the job in a place nobody remembers him outside of those walls. But faithfulness still counts even when nobody is watching. I remember hearing a story about a hospital janitor who was asked years into their job, why did they keep on cleaning the floors so well? And he said this, I don't just clean floors, I help people heal. Today it looks like cleaning a floor. Nobody was writing his performance review. No family member was writing his name in a thank you card. But he knew that it mattered. The unseen work within his job mattered and made a difference as a whole. That's Joseph in that cell. Nobody's writing his performance review either. He's not running a prison because someone's going to promote him. He's just faithful with what is directly in front of him because that's who he is, watched or not. We need to do the unseen work well. Here's my question for you this morning. What are you doing right now that nobody will applaud? The quiet work, the unnoticed task, the thing that you do with excellence that there's a real chance that nobody would ever notice. Here's what Joseph's story tells us about that room. God is watching, and God is still providing. It just might not be noticeable in the moment. Because let's be honest, we can feel forgotten in that room. And when we feel forgotten long enough, we have questions that creep into our minds. Is it worth it? Is it worth it showing up to my job and doing well? Is it worth it being faithful in my life? Is it worth it showing up for my marriage and for my family? Galatians 6:9 answers that question directly. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Don't be weary. Don't give up. It is worth it. Not because the payoff is always visible, but because we have a God that is there with us. He's not distant. He's not on the other side that once we make it through, then he's there with us. He's here with us today. And that's the real question underneath the question, really answer underneath the question. Showing us faithful, being faithful in a forgotten room. You might not always see the produce that you want. You might not always see the outcome that you want, but we have a God that sits there and is with us and loves us. So he has 2 years in a forgotten room, and then, without warning, the door swings open. Not just out of prison, but all the way to the top. Now Joseph faces the hardest version of this test yet. Whether he can stay faithful with the ring, the same way he's been faithful with nothing. In a single day, everything changes. Pharaoh has a dream nobody can interpret, and then finally, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And Joseph is pulled out of prison, shaved, cleaned up, dressed, and brought before the most powerful man in the ancient world. He interprets the dream, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And within hours, Pharaoh puts on his own signet ring on Joseph and says this, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. 30 years old, and yesterday he was a forgotten prisoner. Here's what I want you to see. The real test of Joseph's character wasn't just surviving the pit or the prison. The real test is whether the same faithfulness holds up once he actually has power. See, Joseph's posture doesn't change just because the platform did. Because power changes people. Give someone authority, money, or leverage, and you can really find out who they were the whole time. Joseph administrates the whole famine relief system for Egypt with total integrity, storing grain for 7 years, then distributing it so carefully that Genesis 41:57 says, people from all the world came to Egypt to buy the grain. And then his brothers show up. The same brothers that threw him into the pit and sold him show up starving, bowing before him with absolutely no idea who he is. This is the exact scene from his 2 teenage dreams that he had in Genesis 37, and they're finally coming true. his family bowing exactly the way he described. He tests them. He plants his own silver cup in the sack of the youngest brother, Benjamin, and accuses him of theft, drawing out the tension over several chapters to see who his brothers have really become. See, it's not out of cruelty. It's to see if they would abandon Benjamin the way that they abandoned himself. By the time we reach Genesis 45, he can't hold it together any longer. He clears the room of all the Egyptians officials and says, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" And weeps so loudly that the Egyptians outside could hear. He has every leverage over his brothers, every leverage over the people that sold him into slavery. He could have destroyed them without even lifting a finger. And he doesn't use it to settle the score. Joseph doesn't just forgive his brothers in the moment of emotion. His whole life was building this kind of character that could survive holding the power that he had. See, let your faithfulness survive success, not just hardship. It's easy to tell yourself, I'm really going to be faithful once things get better. Once I have more resources, once I'm not so stretched out thin, once I finally have that freedom, that position, that's when I can truly be faithful with what God has for me. We treat faithfulness like it's something we're saving up for a better version of our circumstances. Where in your life do you have power right now? Might be a promotion, might be an opportunity, might be some new leverage over someone. Might even be over someone that has hurt you. The question isn't whether you'd use that power to get even. It's whether the character you had before has built you for the moment of having that. Because here's what success and power tend to do. They make us forget who got us there. God warns us of this in the Bible in Deuteronomy 8 when Moses is speaking to Israel right before they enter the promised land. A land with good houses, full vineyards, herds, flocks ready to be multiplied, silver and gold waiting to be had. And his warning isn't don't enjoy it. His warning is this: once you have it all, don't forget it was God who brought you here. See, it's not poverty that makes people forget God. It tends to be success. When everything's going well, when we finally have the power, when we finally have the resources that we've always wanted, we can quietly start believing that we were the ones that got ourselves there. Joseph didn't let the throne rewrite who he was. Whatever power he gained, he refused to let it change him. And he refused to let it make him who he actually, it helped him not forget who actually got him there. That's the whole reason that there's a chance for reconciliation with his brothers. Not because he discovered a new capacity of mercy. It was because that mercy was already there, being grown throughout his lifetime. So don't wait for better circumstances to be faithful. And don't let the power change who you are. And don't forget who got you there. So we have 3 rooms. We have the house, we have the prison, we have the palace. 3 rooms, 1 man, 1 unbroken thread of faithfulness running through them all. Which brings us back to where we started. I want to slow down here for a second, because there's a distinction underneath this whole story that we can miss if we read it too fast. See, let's look back at Genesis 50:20 one more time. You intended to do harm to me, but God intended it for good, to preserve the lives of many people, as is happening right now. If we read that verse too fast, it sounds like God showed up just at the right time. Like there was a plan the whole time, a light at the end of the tunnel that Joseph just needed to hold on until the reveal. But that's not actually what happened. God's faithfulness to Joseph never wavered. Genesis 50:20 is Joseph looking backwards, decades later, finally able to see how the whole story looked at once. But he didn't get to read that the first time through. He didn't get to skip to the end. He had to live Genesis 39, 40, 41. He had to live day by day by day, choice by choice by choice. And here's why that matters for us. We tend to think our faithfulness should be validated by how fast God moves. If he answers quickly, we can stay faithful. If the pit turns into promotion in a few weeks, we could do that. But our faithfulness to God was never supposed to be validated by his timeline. Joseph didn't have Genesis 50 pinned up on his prison wall to give him motivation. He didn't have this verse to prove that it's all going to work out. He just had to make a decision, the same decision over and over and over. That's the distinction. It's easy to look at Joseph's ending and go, well, yeah, he stayed faithful. It worked out. But he didn't know that it was going to work out. He chose to be faithful each and every day, step by step, in real time. See, faithfulness isn't believing God will move soon. It's obeying him whether he does or not. Let me say that again. Faithfulness isn't believing God will move soon. It's obeying him whether or not he does. So whatever room you find yourself in this morning, I want you to choose faithfulness. I'd love to invite you to stand. The band is going to be coming. We're going to have a little reflection time response. But I want you to think, where are you at? Are you struggling? Do you need a community to come around you? Do you need prayer? Do you need to be uplifted? Because the beautiful thing about the Christian life is that we don't do this alone. We're not alone. And as the band plays, we have some prayer partners on the side. But I also want to remind you that you're not alone, that God is with you. Each and every step, each and every decision. Again, if we look at Joseph's story, it wasn't fair what happened to him. But he chose to be faithful in each of the rooms, in each of the spaces where he was. So as we respond today, let's let God speak to you.
Thank you for joining with us today. If you're looking to connect with us in person, we would love that. We have services every Sunday, one at 9 a.m., one at 10:45, and we got a spot for you. If you're looking to financially support our ministry, you can always do that online at clcc.ca/give. Have an awesome rest of your day.